Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's live broadcast, Clinical Trials, Navigating Disruption to Thriving. I'm Lisa Henderson, the Editorial Director of Applied Clinical Trials, and I'll be your moderator for today's event. We are pleased to bring you this webcast presented by Applied Clinical Trials and sponsored by ZS. I'd now like to share a statement from our sponsor. ZS is a professional services firm that works side by side with companies to help develop and deliver products that drive customer value and company results. The company leverages their deep industry expertise, leading-edge analytics, technology, and strategy to create solutions that work in the real world. With more than 35 years of experience and more than 7,000 ZSers in over 25 offices worldwide, they are passionately committed to helping companies and their customers thrive. We have a few important announcements before we begin. This webcast is designed to be interactive, and we encourage you to ask questions during the event. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of your screen. You can enlarge the slide window by clicking on the small square icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide window, or by hovering your mouse over the lower right-hand corner and dragging the window to the desired size. The slides will advance automatically during the event. If you have any technical problems viewing or hearing this presentation, please click on the question mark Help widget in the dock at the bottom of your presentation window. I would now like to introduce today's speakers. We are pleased to be joined today by Bhaskar Kutab and Sharma Ramanathan. Bhaskar is a leader with ZS's RDE Excellence and Clinical Space, where she helps life sciences companies bring therapies faster to patients globally. Bhaskar brings over 15 years of experience and leads ZS's Clinical Design Center platform. And with over 12 years' experiences in life sciences, primarily in the R&D area, Sharma supports several pharma clients and internal asset development to optimize clinical trials end-to-end through advanced analytics and data sciences, big data technologies for data management and governance, real-world evidence, and other advisory and consulting services. So thank you for joining us today. And Bhaskar, would you like to get us started?
Great. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome, everybody. We are here today because there are people out there that are in high need of medical care. Some are struggling even more because of the recent pandemic, as we know. And we want to help these folks overcome challenges in participating in clinical trials. We want to help patients get the medicines they need and deserve much faster than we've historically seen in a new virtual reality. So in this session today, my colleague Sharma and I, we will be summarizing the key areas impacted from COVID-19 in the R&D space. We will go through some of the patients and physician perspectives that we have seen as the industry is working through the response mode. We will also cover our experience in ZS of how we have been working with the industry to help mitigate some of these disruptions to our clinical offerings and to help reorient existing clinical trials and drive patient engagement. We will go through some live case study examples with you, and we hope that this will allow you to bring some ideas back to your team. So, at ZS, we have been working with various industry sponsors and healthcare organizations to help develop patient-focused solutions. For us, patient impact and care has been a cornerstone focus, specifically where medical care needs to address personalization, it needs to address communication, and the human element behind it all. So understanding the voice of patients, understanding the patient burden assessment and the impact of various clinical decisions on the patient burden, accounting for communication and engagement in virtual settings, and through the barriers to still keep the patient in the center of clinical care system is the focus of our offerings and our discussion today as well. So as we have recently seen the industry go towards a halt and a reorientation of the priorities, we wanted to really understand what's happening on the ground and understand what are some of the sentiments that we need to account for from the patient side into our replanning efforts. So in a recent study conducted by ZS and Continuum Clinical, in which we partnered to launch a global patient survey in May of last month, our goal was really to understand the key concerns and challenges in the age of COVID and the virtual care setting firsthand from patients. So the study was approximately ran across 5 geographies, covering 1,250 patients across various indications that have been listed below to understand some of the sentiments and the live results of impact. So as our focus was in the midst of when we are working with the industry to actually change the planning and execution of how trials are being performed, as I mentioned, our focus was really to understand the back of the scenes what is happening. What are some of the sentiments and the perspectives that are prevailing that will help us develop a strategy for clinical development pathways forward. So, as not to our surprise, we saw that 57% of the patients' response was they're less likely to participate in a clinical trial in the next 6 months if required to visit a hospital that is currently treating COVID-19 patients. So this didn't come as a surprise. We wanted to see some numbers behind it. And of course, this has a direct impact if your enrollments are projected or forecasted for sites that are existing or were treating COVID-19 patients. There's a direct impact on enrollment. Some of the biggest concerns among the patients that as some of the results were coming in, we saw were risk of exposure in hospital settings. So with more than 75% saying that they're not likely to participate in clinical trials because of risk of exposure. And this eventually had a connection with the number of visits that were required from them. It has an impact on the visitations at the trial sites, with likelihood to impact by 40% essentially. So other concerns that we saw included transportation burden to and from sites, interactions with physicians, lack of available support, etc. These heightened patient concerns put pressures on healthcare providers and sponsors to incorporate alternative trial elements that are going to promote patient safety and to also address some of these risks and concerns. Interestingly, we see that patients value clear communication and, for example, on what the side effects are going to be or what the expectations on the requirements are from them, more so than virtual trial elements, followed by free medical care and less cost burden on them during these unprecedented times. So virtual trial elements, what do they include? Some of the wish list was 24-hour online support, home shipments, telemedicine, online questionnaires, digital formats, and digital apps for them to engage with. These all landed on the desired list. So the implication of these findings is that for us to realize that clear communication should be the first focus as we set up virtual trial elements, or we develop plans for patients' re-engagement and site reinitiation as well. In parallel, we conducted a social listening study, and this was purely looking at conversations online. Around 50 million conversations were analyzed and assessed. And in this, we wanted to just dig a little bit deeper through the voice of the different channels as well. So it's clear some of the examples are illustrated here, but it's clear that some of those anxieties and fears are coming out directly from the voice of the patients and the voice of the caregivers as well. So a lot related to the general psychological impact that during this period, and also we expect that prolonging after is going to be onset as well. Complications with comorbidity, specifically if you have existing chronic or non-chronic diseases, and how, for example, existing tumors and cancers are getting impacted. And from a caregiver side, we're seeing the challenges around, this is very obvious in some countries and states as well, on some of the decisions that had to be made on who comes first. And this had direct impact on how patient populations are getting medical care. We're seeing that the risk of exposure in medical centers, this was clear from the study that was highlighted earlier as well. There's a clear concern around, am I at risk if I will be near or in a specific hospital setting or trial facility? So in summary, we have seen that there is a clear disruption in the market, specifically from patients' and physicians' perspective. Now we're going to pivot a little bit and see what are some of the tactical solutions that we have helped the industry with in addressing some of these disruptions. And for this, I pass along to my colleague, Sharma, to walk us through some examples.
All right. Thank you so much, Vasca. Hi, everyone. We just saw how COVID-19 has impacted clinical trials and how patients and physician communities are thinking about their participation in clinical trials under the COVID world. In a way, COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way trials have been run in the past. Traditional methods may not work today, and even in the post-COVID world. GS has been partnering with several industry leaders in identifying better analytical, marketing, patient engagement, and operational strategies to mitigate COVID-19 disruptions on clinical trials today and in the future. We will dive deeper into those solutions today and talk about a few real-life examples and success stories. All right, so there are 4 key areas that we think would shape the future of clinical trials. Many of our industry partners have started enabling capabilities across these areas to stay competitive and bring life-saving treatments to patients faster. Some of these areas may look obvious, but building a cohesive strategy and interconnected capabilities are key to support their decisions. First thing is leveraging data and proven analytics to support portfolio, program, and study-level design, feasibility, and operational decisions. Just using historical pre-COVID data may not be that effective. Sponsors have to leverage COVID-19 prevalence and incidence data at the country and county level and real-world data to assess the impact and drive qualified decisions around patient safety and regulatory success. The next is to evaluate the quality and the risk of clinical studies on patient safety, statistical integrity, and regulatory success dimensions. This RAC process is more important now than ever before, not just for sponsors to meet regulatory obligations, but also to build confidence among patient and health community to improve enrollment. The third area is patient and investigator communication. As we saw in our earlier section, both patients and investigators communities have expressed proactive and transparent communication as a major parameter to participate in clinical trials. Whether running trial in or post-COVID world, sponsors should take proactive measures in incorporating patients and investigators' perspective on study design and operations. The final area is virtual visits or direct-to-patient strategy. As far as this dimension is concerned, one size doesn't fit all needs. Sponsors have to take their best attempt to eliminate in-person visits for patients as much as possible in this COVID world, whether enabling mobile nurses or mobile technologies or letting patients self-administer treatments. There are various technologies that sponsors could adopt, which we will see in course of our presentation. All right, so starting with data and analytics, there are several questions that we are helping our clients address using analytics and data science. You may have these questions as well. The questions are, for ongoing studies, what trials are at high risk and to what degree? Which countries' sites will be ready to reactivate and by when? What is the impact of COVID on site resources? So a few examples. And for planned studies, you may have questions like, which comorbidities are at high risk? Where should companies run the next trials? What would be our enrollment delay and duration? And same goes for the COVID trials too. It's getting very competitive today. These questions under COVID-19 cannot be addressed using traditional data systems and processes. We may have to adopt novel techniques, and that's exactly what ZS is persevering today with several industry leaders. How do we do this? We use our Design Center application. It is a one-stop shop to drive portfolio to steady level design, feasibility, and operational decisions. Several COVID-related data sets are pre-integrated, hence many of our pharma clients are currently utilizing the solution to assess COVID-19 impact and develop strategies to mitigate those. Of all our Design Center applications you see in this, CTFO, which is Clinical Trial Feasibility Optimizer, and CTEMP, the Clinical Trial Enrollment Modeling and Prediction applications, are the predominantly used ones to assess the impact of COVID-19 and build mitigation strategies. CTFO helps identifying better countries, sites, and investigators based on different scenarios. And CTEMP helps predict enrollment duration and probability of enrollment success for the combination of sites and investigators that we may choose. From a data perspective, there's 30 terabyte of data sets already pre-integrated within the system, which include COVID-19 prevalence and incidence data as well at the country and county level across various markets. In addition to that, the site and country level COVID-19 impact has been pre-estimated for our clients to leverage this out of the box. All right, so let's dive deeper into the CTFO and CTEMP solutions a bit. CTFO stands for Clinical Trial Feasibility Optimizer. It's a first-in-kind solution, and of course we built this side by side with our big clients. Essentially, it helps us take a systematic journey approach to optimize feasibility, which include country sites and investigator selection. You may have questions like, where are my patients, eligible patients, not just in U.S. but outside of U.S. How does my competitive landscape look like, and how does competitive landscape impact my study performance? What is the standard of care across various markets and the reimbursement outlook? And based on all these, which countries, sites, and investigators would help me enroll patients faster and at an optimal cost range? All these key driving factors are encapsulated in one platform with proven, tested, and validated data science algorithms, and we've been supporting our big pharma with these capabilities out of the box. And when it comes to CTEMP, it helps us predict the probability of enrollment completion. The novel aspect is that this one takes into consideration some of the market events, like COVID-19 pandemic, for example, to estimate the enrollment duration and probability of enrollment success. This is built on a combination of machine learning and Poisson gamma distribution model, which, unlike the traditional models, does consider the variation in the enrollment patterns at the site level. The predictive algorithm, what is built within this platform, is continuously updated as well, based on the emerging data, so our sponsors get realistic just-in-time predictions. It does predict the low-performing sites early in the process, not just based on the recruitment trends, but also using quality-related trends, which are very important in this COVID world. The system will also inform site deactivation timeline as well, based on the historical and the current performance data. All right, so we saw how we leverage data and analytics and data science to help our clients inform better decisions when it comes to feasibility, which is mainly which countries, sites, and investigators are better, and what is the impact to my design decisions in light of COVID-19. Now, let's talk a little bit about the risk assessment, which we think is very important today than ever before. How are we helping our clients with risk assessment? So implementing a process to identify and mitigate risk in light of COVID-19, as I said, it's more important than ever before to ensure patient safety and reliability of results from a regulatory standpoint. We think it's an opportunity for pharma to expedite trials by having a systematic risk assessment and management process. How we do this, we help our clients across three broad areas. And all these are per Accelerate standards, but modified slightly to address the COVID situation. The first, we have been implementing and are enhancing the risk assessment and categorization tool, RACT, for our clients. It may sound familiar to many of you, but given the COVID situation, the process of identifying and mitigating risks and issues have to change. There's greater emphasis given to applying quantitative methods and taxonomies for identifying, detecting risks and issues at the country, site, and vendor level. Secondly, the system helps proactively identify critical data, processes, and the risks and issues associated to those, which may have direct impact to patient safety and statistical integrity. The third thing that we're helping our clients with is, and then the final step, is determining the quality tolerance limits, which is very important from our perspective. These are quantitative thresholds assigned to each risk and or issue to proactively monitor the degree of risk and take preventative measures before it gets too late. So these are some of the high-level areas where we're helping our clients run risk assessment in light of COVID-19. Let me give you a little deeper dive into the risk scoring and the quality threshold limits, which are the quantitative techniques that we have adopted to rationalize risk assessment in this COVID world. We measure the degree of risk on a scale of 1 to 10. 1, 4, 7, and 10, slightly different from Accelerate measures, 1 being a low-profile risk and 10 being high-profile risk. We then populate the risk scores across 3 major dimensions. One is impact to the study. The second one is likelihood of occurrence of the risk, and the third one is probability of occurrence. Predefined thresholds can be set on the system to determine if any additional control is required to mitigate those high-profile risks. And from a quality tolerance limit standpoint, this is a point value assigned to a clinical trial parameter. So the system would initiate an alert for evaluation if a systemic deviation is detected in order to find. Example, if there's continuous deviation or protocol deviation trend, the sponsors need to know at what point they should intervene to avoid major risks. The QTLs help to do that. Yeah, so those are some of the solutions. Now I will pass it over to Bhasga to talk about communication strategy and virtual trials.
Thank you, Sharma. So as we saw that Sharma covered more of the data sciences and analytical techniques that could be used to help address some of the impacts on the clinical trials. As a result, we're going to look at how we look at more qualitative techniques as well to mitigate some of these disruptions. So we saw earlier that patients are expecting clear communication and direct outreach during these unprecedented times, a trend that is expected to continue as the new normal. So how do you go about effectively developing this communication strategy, which will have a personalized impact? How do we replan our site's reinitiation? To answer these questions, we need to understand the site's reinitiation journey, which can look very different by study, by geography, and by various other dimensions as well. So the replanning, we see that replanning effort will not be fruitful if sponsors are playing catch-up when sites move along the journey. And hence, prediction of site pathways along the reinitiation becomes very important in helping move this reopening and reinitiation efforts forward. We see that some of the drivers that can be incorporated in your prediction models as you are addressing the site reinitiation and reforecasting plans can include COVID-19 modeling that could be focused on very quantitative modeling that is tracking live regional and national level daily changes. With that predictive model, you can overlay, and we have done these in various study examples, you can overlay site-level insights And these site-level insights can be brought either through some of your site performance metrics, or in the case in which we have been involved, we have been doing some light primary market research with site-facing teams and directly with patients as well. So really getting this site and patient-level feedback into your plan and combining this with the leading indicators that affect essentially your planning dimension. So once sponsors understand the site pathways on reinitiation and recruitment, leveraging data science techniques, as we saw earlier, a customized stakeholder engagement and communication plan become essential to develop a focused replan and reopening effort. So what does this mean? This means really understanding the who, the what, and the how of the stakeholders involved. So understanding which key stakeholder, from patients to staff, to investigators, to your sponsors, to your local authorities, understanding who all is involved and how are they connected and interaction with each other in this ecosystem. This will really allow you to understand the drivers of what will impact the change going forward in your program. Each stakeholder in the trial ecosystem will have varying drivers of what impacts them and what is important to them and what motivates them. So mapping this out is going to help along the stakeholder assessment journey. And eventually, understanding of these drivers allows the sponsors and clinical trial organizations to devise targeted engagement plans, leveraging channel optimization techniques. So we see that one size does not fit all. And each stakeholder, each individual entity has different motivational drivers, and these need to be addressed for in your replanning efforts. So some of the examples of how leveraging our trial enrollment acceleration capabilities and some of the tactics that I've mentioned about earlier, some of the examples of how we map what matters to stakeholders can be seen here. So segmentation of key stakeholders by type. In this example, you're seeing investigators more on site effort, site side, patient side, and really understanding their level of awareness and impact and the information requirements that they have. This will feed into your targeted communication planning. And marrying the understanding of these various stakeholders with the competitive landscape will allow you to develop an engagement plan that works and can be implemented upon. So internal stakeholders assessment, making sure you get the patient context and overlaying it with the activities that are happening in the market, we see this holistically as going as part of the communication plan strategy. So the fourth tactic that we want to cover is virtual trials. We know that the industry has been speaking about virtual trials for quite some time. However, we feel that these times have really pushed us towards where trials are and virtual interactions are becoming the new normal. So it's almost accelerated. So as companies are setting up and scaling virtual trials, we are helping our clients to figure out the design and the scalability of it. And so the questions such as, how do you make a virtual trial patient-centric becomes important? As we talked about it, that we can put a technology in place, however, not making it patient-centric will just make it just one digital technology that has been put in the hands out there. So how can you make sure that a machine or a gadget is not just being put out for the sake of virtual reality, but really being placed in the hands of patients to understand their needs and bring care to them? Conducting each stage of the clinical trial from the comforts of patient's home will become the new normal. But how do you ensure that all the technology costs are not replacing the staff costs that were previously in place? That social media and digital channels are properly being used to recruit and collect data? And how do we make sure patients are treated like patients? The human element of the patient side is being accounted for in the virtual setup. These are some of the critical questions that you need to address when setting up a virtual program. Some of the common challenges that we are seeing as virtual programs and trials are being implemented, these include, but are not limited to, the lack of data integration. our channels are expanding. We're going from devices to online recruitment to various mechanisms in place of how information is going to pour into clinical trials. So setting up for data integration becomes essential to scale a program. We're seeing that compromised patient safety and adverse effects reporting is a key risk in successful implementation as well. Unclear regulatory acceptance, data privacy, and really missing the understanding of patient burden that some administrative aspects of a trial can have. So what are we seeing that in order to make a virtual trial or program successful, sponsors must select the right study. They must maintain patient safety. They must ensure data quality and must protect patient privacy in play. So as part of the virtual program or virtual trial setup, we have been partnering with key sponsors to really address some of these key questions that I've highlighted before in the design and the setup phases of these programs, including eventually going into execution. So some of the questions, critical questions that you have in front are making sure that you identify the right opportunity upfront. Not all trials can go virtual. So making a portfolio level decision on across the portfolio and really understanding where you want to place your bets is going to become the key. When you are setting up a program, understanding of the patient characteristics, this is either through direct patient outreach, through market research, or even leveraging some of the real-world evidence data assets to really understand the patient characteristics will ensure success in a program. We saw the data integration and platform setup will be key, so the technologies in place will make a difference. From small vendors to big data implementation, choose the right mix in play. And of course, not to mention that trial logistics is going to be a big piece of virtual trials. So questions that need to be addressed is that how do you make sure that the virtual component workflows are properly processed out from sites to investigators, or could you go in a hybrid trial model? And eventually, as Sharma had mentioned before, even risk-based management accounts for in the virtual setup as well. So making sure that your risk plans are embedded from the cross-stakeholder perspective as well, taking into account patient safety, study and integrity, data privacy, and not to mention really honing in on the regulatory framework that is going to be in play in the various geographies where you have your trial set up. So those were some of the areas that we covered, solutions that we wanted to cover from the mitigation perspective. Now we want to provide to you real case studies that we have been working on specifically in the last few months with clients. And for this, I'll pass it on to Sharma.
Sure. Thanks, Bhaskar. So let's talk about 3 sample case studies. And again, these are sample projects. There are many projects that we've been doing in this area under COVID-19. The first one, this one is an interesting program. It's in IBD space, ulcerative colitis area, and it's a complex disease condition which has kind of toxicity endpoints included in it. So the situation was the client has been trying to enroll for close to like 18 to 20 months and was able to achieve 15% of the targeted patients. Then we applied the same techniques that we just spoke about right now, the trial feasibility optimization using our CTFO and CTEMP, incorporating several real-world data, prevalence and incidence data, and the clinical trial registries as well. So that's the quantitative element to help evaluate the sites and investigators that they have already considered and the new country sites and investigators that they could potentially initiate to improve enrollment. And on the qualitative side, as Bhaskar spoke about, so we did immersion interviews to understand how our clients can optimize engagement with the patients and the investigators community. Since it has significant toxicity element. In fact, that was one of the major objectives of this program. The patients were a little apprehensive to be part of this program. So then ZS worked with our sponsor and the investigators side by side to develop a cohesive patient engagement program, so we can demonstrate the value of this program to the patients today and also in the future. And we did a bunch of ethnography research as well at the clinical sites to understand the cultural nuances as well. This was a global program across Americas, Europe, and Asia as well. And there's an element of cultural sensitivity that played a significant role. We did a bunch of TDIs and IDIs. Those are marketing terminologies with the trial staff to understand the impact to clinical trials. And with all these insights, we also did a quantitative survey to understand the degree of impact across various geographies. And all these insights were conceptualized into a bunch of mitigation strategies, which was co-created along with the investigators and sponsors. So what we actually did, we identified the barriers and drivers to patient enrollment, and we built a bunch of mitigation strategies. We worked on feasibility replanning across major markets. In addition to that, we identified physician networks, not just within U.S., outside of U.S. as well, to drive referrals for this program. So which was a significant component that led to the acceleration of recruitment performance. We also did social awareness campaigns across key markets. In addition to that, we built a bunch of patient-facing materials to demonstrate the value proposition to the stakeholders. So what was the result? The trial, which was enrolling at 0.8 patients per month, started enrolling at 15 patients per month. It was more than 20x improvement in trial performance. So the same way, we did another recent program with a client, again in a heavily competitive and complex therapy area. The client was in a similar situation. The client just enrolled 1/5 of their predicted target when we started our rescue strategy on this program. The current efforts that the client had were not very focused, and not many COVID-related factors have been incorporated into the planning efforts. So we followed the same approach. I won't go into the details of the approach that we took, but essentially the 4-step that we spoke about today, starting with trial feasibility optimization using CTFO and CTEMP, and having a better communication strategy. And we also did a risk assessment for this client to optimize their design parameters. And then finally, there were some operational strategies as well that we informed to improve performance. The solution was exactly the same. We segmented sites that had high potential to enroll better, and we also built a what we call as network map, where the sites can collaborate if in case they don't have patients within the practice with other physicians in the market. We developed that proposition materials to communicate the value of the study to patients and health communities and so on and so forth. And had a similar impact. It was one of the testimony from our key client that the first quarter after we implemented the solution, the trial started to see 6.5x improvement in enrollment performance compared to the first 14 months of the enrollment period. So those are two examples where we applied a cohesive and inclusive strategy, which had quantitative and qualitative elements that we spoke today. And this one is at the portfolio level. Our client would want to assess all the studies within portfolio, identify studies that are at high risk, and develop some mitigation strategies and to run those studies in this COVID world and also in future. So our approach, as we said, we used our CTFO and CTEMP where we have a bunch of the COVID-19 related data as well. But in addition to that, so we have several predictive algorithms built within the system to help us inform the COVID-19 impact across various geographies, which is not just one scenario where we are in COVID-19 today, but we may likely see future waves of COVID-19 as well in few markets. And we did predict those across various geographies based on the current trend and the lifestyle considerations across various markets. And in addition to that, so we gave them how does the predicted duration of lockdown would impact the individual sites across these various markets. Plus, based on these insights, we identified studies that are at high risk, which would need immediate intervention, versus studies that are at low risk, which can either be put on hold from a planning perspective. So from the solution standpoint, this is built within our CTFO and CTEMP platform. So we mostly leverage the out-of-the-box capabilities that we had to help them inform the country-level risk and the delay for the trial at the portfolio level. And we also gave them a realistic enrollment performance for different studies so we can rationalize our financial planning and study planning activities. So the impact here, I know it's heavily verbose, but essentially in 4 weeks, just in 4 weeks, we helped our clients rationalize the study performance and the financial planning for 95% of their studies within the portfolio. Then this gave them a visibility into COVID disruptions on their entire clinical pipeline and help them assess the prioritization decisions, and from early insights on delays for ongoing and planned studies, help them reevaluate the design inputs and also the site reactivation plans. Yeah, with that, I'll pass it over to Bhaskar to talk about some final thoughts.
Yes, great. Thank you, Sharma. So we thank you again for joining this webinar today. And we really hope that we wanted to give a flavor of starting from the understanding really what's going on the ground from a patient and physician's perspective when it comes to the recent COVID pandemic. And give you a flavor of what are some of the key solutions that you can take back as you are looking at the replanning and reinitiation of your clinical development program. And then also leave you with some case examples of how quantitative and qualitative types of methods can work really well together, as some of the case studies that Sharma went through. So as we mentioned, we are here to help. Our focus has been really honing in on the country and site analytics using data sciences techniques to focus on some of the enrollment and the site performance related KPIs and analytics that are required. And also leveraging some of the data sciences techniques to reinitiate and to bring risk management into your programs as well. We have also been heavily thinking about the qualitative, where the communication strategies that are put in place as sites are going into reinitiation. And last but not least, virtual and direct-to-patient strategy with some of the elements that we covered. So we've been working quite heavily in that as well, partnering with the industry. There are also some ZF resources our team has been extensively working on putting together, working with our various experts throughout the organization. And these are available on zf.com. And some of the publications that you will find are focusing on the aspect of the reopening of the clinical trials that we mentioned. We published a report on the pipeline programs that are in place as well, and some of the 4 actions summarized that we were talking about in the age of the disruption. So that concludes our presentation today, and we will open up to questions now. Thank you.
Thank you both for your informative presentation. Before we get started on the question and answer session, I would like to remind our audience how to submit questions. You can submit questions by typing them in the Q&A box, which can be found on the right-hand side of your presentation window. And we will get started. So our first question is, how do you think pharma should change their feasibility process to address countries, sites, and investigator selection in the age of COVID-19 and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we look at this is across three major dimensions. One, the countries and counties that face just one wave of COVID-19 and dissipates. That's one scenario. The second scenario is the countries or counties that may face multiple waves of COVID-19 for the next year or so. There is some predictive process that we have built that could help us determine which countries might potentially face a few waves of COVID scenarios. And the third one is, what do we do post the COVID world? So in any scenario, one thing that is very important is to integrate COVID impact on our feasibility process, which never existed in the past. There are a few data sets that exist in the public domain that the ZS has harmonized for different clients, which in combination with the clinical and real-world data can truly deliver powerful insights on the country sites and investigative potential for the COVID world and beyond as well. And if you think about it, it also helps us in projecting realistic enrollment duration in the context of COVID-19 at the country and site level, and it helps us truly assess the eventual impact of study and the program level success.
Excellent. Thank you, Sharma. Our next question, the patient engagement approach you spoke about is quite interesting. Can you talk a bit about the value of this in the current situation, and when should pharma do this in the study continuum?
So thanks, Lisa. I'll take it.
Okay.
So I think from a patient engagement perspective, right, we have, as an industry, we're heading towards more of a collaborative model for the last few years, in which patient groups, patient advocacy groups, individual direct-to-patient has become kind of where we're headed towards anyways. But in the last few months, right, this is an accelerated trend, and we have seen clearly from this survey and the readout earlier as well, there is a clear need for transparency and open communication. However, we do see that one size does not fit all. So one of the learnings has been that can we bring in some of the qualitative insights that have already either existing in your programs, or there's a lot of data that is already kind of submitted out there for the last few months. So bringing some of the qualitative insights, or even conducting a quick sort of market research study and understanding what we had talked about, right, the stakeholders' value drivers, how individual stakeholders are going to be impacted for the long run as well, and devising an engagement plan which is a little bit more targeted. So this is somewhere where some of the message testing can play a role. We can learn from our from commercialization efforts, where targeted message testing could play a role by geographies, right? Because every patient cluster will be impacted differently depending on the geography as well. So I think really focusing on one size does not fit all from an engagement strategy will be key, and looking at basically demonstrating the value of why participation in clinical trials still matters, specifically as ongoing kind of concerns are going to be prevailing even after the current wave. And we're also seeing that in general, the empathy towards the patient community is going to be key. So as hopefully, as we try to see the trend kind of stabilize, we hope that, as the second waves or, if future waves come in, we have kind of gotten in front of the engagement piece and we're able to develop a long-term sustainable connect with the community, both on the investigator and patient side. That would be our vision. Thank you.
Thank you, Buzz. Let's go to the next question we have. We all do RAC. This is a traditional and mandated regulatory process. You said this has to change in the COVID world. Can you provide your perspective and approach on how pharma should change this?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So I can take this. So you all might know there's a strong push from the regulatory side that the sponsors have to perform a comprehensive risk assessment for any new studies in light of COVID-19. This means that the sponsors have to evaluate every single data and processes in a given study and identify risks that can potentially impact patient safety and or the data integrity. These things will have direct implications to the regulatory success as well. Hence, we have to take this seriously now than ever before. The way we help our clients with is by taking a combination of qualitative and quantitative approach. We first identify all critical data and processes associated to a study and map potential risks that may affect patient safety, well-being, and statistical integrity. Like you saw in the presentation, we then score each risk against the three major dimensions. One is impact of the study. The other is likelihood of occurrence. And the third one is the probability of detection of those risks. Then finally, we determine the quality tolerance limits that you saw in the presentation for continuous tracking and monitoring. All these are done kind of in one integrated system.
Great, thank you, Sharma. And our next question, what is your perspective on the virtual trials? You said this is the new normal. Will this stick together in the post-COVID world as well, and why?
Thanks, Lisa. I'll take this one. So they say, either you learn by doing, or you learn by designing or planning. And this is what we're recommending, that we learn by designing effectively. So, virtual trials are not a new concept in R&D, and it's been for a while. We have been running virtual trials, successful ones in pockets as well. The question, but now, in this now, it's become more prominent than ever before. So we do believe that this will be here to stay in the foreseeable future. I think a virtual way is affecting all of us on a day-to-day basis, and we can say it's here to stay in healthcare as well. And similarly to engagement, we don't think that virtualization of all your trials, where you have the same design and same strategy for all your trials, so going back to the one size does not fit all, will not work here either. And as you head on this journey, and if you are on the plans of scaling your virtual setup, then really understanding figuring out the data infrastructure piece is key, specifically if you're looking into scaling your trials. And also figuring out, the feasibility of which sites in your current roster essentially will support that. So doing this upfront planning is key. We are seeing this concept of siteless trial or study playbook emerge. And this basically could be that, you figure out which aspects of your trials could essentially be virtualized upfront. This is in the design phase, as I said. So it could include, for example, figuring out the adoption of mobile nurses, this administrative protocol that could be virtualized, which aspects of telemedicine you will adopt, which ones of what type of information exchange between the sites will happen. So this all information elements can go in that playbook, if you may. So
While virtual trials have significant potential to reduce burden and accelerate studies, specifically in the long haul, we do believe, and, if appropriately done, we do think that this is an opportunity for us to really look into the virtual setup and scale it for the future, because now we're on this accelerated pathway anyways.
That's a really excellent point, and the fact that your playbook, it will evolve as you continue with these learnings and practices. So thank you so much, Bhaskar. Thank you, Sharma, for your insights and for your presentation. I'd also like to thank the audience for attending and for participating in today's event. And I would also like to thank our sponsor, ZS, for making today's educational webcast possible. If you could, audience, please take the survey from our sponsor located on the right-hand side of your screen. You will receive an email alerting you when this webcast will be available for replay. We invite you to forward that announcement to your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. And we thank you all for joining, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.